Hello, listeners. We are back with another episode of Quote Unquote with KK. Over the last season, we talked about job employment, where we had a very senior executive from Gallup who talked about how the job market would shape up in the future after the pandemic and during the pandemic. We also had Rajiv Peshwaria who talked about the future of work and how jobs are going to, and the job market would probably transform as we go into the new normal. In this season, in the next 4 episodes, we are going to be talking about the future of real estate and different aspects of real estate. Since we have been talking about startups and future of work, we thought we should talk about the future of co-working and offices and India's success story in this space. And I have invited a very close and near and dear friend from our real estate industry, Karan Virwani, who happens to be a very young CEO of QuoteUnQuote India. He has transformed the industry, the co-working industry. And let me tell you, I'm really glad that I met Karan when he invited me to his inauguration of his first property in Bangalore, where he converted a movie theater into a fantastic co-working space. And that's where I bumped into Karan. Although I know his father, who's a very successful realtor, real estate magnate in India, and also has listed a REIT in the office space. So I welcome Karan to our show. Welcome, Karan.
Thank you so much, Kapil. Thank you for having me. I just want to quickly start off when I made a small correction that I'm the CEO of WeWork. But yeah, thank you so much for having me and excited to be part of this chat.
Karan, I want to start off by asking you a very simple question. What is co-working? People are very confused. Some people say it's cooperative working. So for the benefit of our audience, if you could very briefly explain what is really co-working and how does that fit in with the future of work?
Sure. So, co-working as a term obviously has evolved over the years, and also the use of our spaces and the users have also evolved. I think originally when the word co-working, started, it was really about community working or collaborative working, which is, really about multiple companies, different stages of existence, different types of people actually in an environment that is designed to create collaboration and allow for people to be able to interact. And the basic principle was that when you're a startup founder or an entrepreneur, I think one of the biggest things that entrepreneur looks for is actually building their network while building their business, because you can leverage different companies, and you need different companies across the life cycle of building a business. And when there never used to be a co-working space, that would mean you having to go out to different conferences, different events, pass out your business card, spend a lot of time actually building that network. And like a lot of people say, the wealth you have eventually is really the network that you really end up accumulating. So a co-working space was a way to actually accelerate that, and put like-minded individuals who are all hustling, all sharing a part of their journey or trying to create their life's work in one space, so that there's like an there's this accelerated collaboration, and that together helps each business grow much faster, and the chances of success of your business growing much larger. So that's really how we started, or the concept actually started, and it was aimed largely towards startups in the early days. But what happened through the progression is, because you firstly had a dynamic environment, but at the same time you had a dynamic model of actually taking space or consuming space, which was completely flexible. It allowed you to scale up and scale down as your business was growing or reducing, and also allowed you access in multiple locations across the world. enterprises or larger companies actually started to see this as a huge benefit for their own workforce. A large amount of workforce across the world is of a particular age. Somewhere between 20 to 40 years of age is really where mass of the workforce is. And these kind of this age group is like-minded in a sense. So regardless of whether you're working at a large company or working for a startup, you have very similar interests, and also as employees of these companies, you are now gravitating to go work at a company not just for the logo or the salary package, but actually for the work environment, for the culture of the organization. And so enterprises started using co-working spaces as a way to also become more relevant to this workforce, as a way to actually attract better talent. And while this talent was in the workspace, they got to not just interact with people from their company, but also from other companies, smaller startups. That led to new ideas forming within the larger companies. So it's like a very like cross-leveraged ecosystem. And when you look at it at scale, the amount of impact that it makes is huge. So it's hard for me to put it into like a small word, but it's like an ever evolving concept, which I think is become such a big part of the ecosystem.
Excellent. Karan, I must congratulate you. In a span of few years, from your first facility in Bangalore to 35 facilities all over India, and I'm sure it's like at a pace of what, two facilities, a facility every 2 months that you are operationalizing across India.
At one stage we basically were opening building a month, or sometimes like in some months we opened multiple buildings in a month. I think in 2018 and 2019 was probably the peak of our, a growth phase, and it was a fun and crazy time. And we were doing almost a building a month. I think globally we were doing close to about, I think somewhere like 3 or 10 buildings a month at one point. So it was huge scale of growth.
And that's where your experience and the ability to scale an organization like yours also comes in. How has been your journey? I mean, how did you manage to do all this in that span to create the largest co-working network and a company in India?
So, there's a lot of things. I think one is having a great team. So that was a big part of our focus as we were building the organization, is like finding really good people who were not just coming on for, to be part of another company, but really believed in the mission and were really truly invested in actually, disrupting the space of commercial real estate and also creating something exciting. So having people motivated and having a good team and people that you can trust, I think was like the biggest secret in actually being able to do that. The second thing was, I think the macro trends in the country also were a big, sort of like tailwind to that. There's a robust startup ecosystem, robust like enterprise take up, lots of large companies who were growing, and the IT sector also growing a lot in India. And so even though the scale seemed large, at that time we were like a very small percentage of the total, sort of absorption in commercial real estate. And I think lastly, it was just our own customers. At one point, I think about 40% of our growth was happening from like our own customers, existing customers. So one part was like just trying to keep up with that and actually keep providing, space and in different locations for them. But to be honest, it was just belief and some amount of risk-taking ability and just determination to, do something huge.
I want to ask you one question, because I've struggled through this in also some of my investments. I disrupted daycare surgery and also started my venture out of Bangalore. And one of the clear challenges of getting the right people to start off a new concept like co-working, what I also went through in my daycare surgery chain growth phase, was people from the same industry could not really accept this concept or the disruption. And as a result, we had to go actually outside of the healthcare industry to bring in talent and adapt them to the healthcare industry. Did you face similar challenges in creating a culture and an organization at WeWork in India?
I mean, definitely. I think in the in the early days, just when it was a few of us, convincing a landlord that has been doing real estate for the last 20 years in the same way to think about this new concept and how office is going to change was a big task. I think I was just like very naive at that time, and that actually worked in my favor because that just allowed us to go in and have these conversations without actually feeling like we were saying something stupid or anything like that, and that we truly believed in the concept. But again, it just became a fact of delivering, and landlords seeing the value in it that helped do that. From a hiring standpoint, we did have a good mix of seasoned real estate sort of like professionals, but also we hired a lot from different sectors, right? We hired a lot from hospitality, from hotels. We hired a lot from SaaS companies because we were like growing at that scale, and the selling of our product was similar to that. IT companies, and designers and architects also. The ones we found were very young, all filled with new ideas. Hadn't actually been maximum. I think someone maybe would have been 8 years experience or 9 years of experience at that point in time. So you're not ingrained, and you're not like sort of like rigid in your thoughts. You are free to think a lot more, about new ideas and innovate and things like that. So I think that was a very important, piece. Also, there was also a global phenomenon happening with WeWork specifically as a brand, right? We were on like rocket ship rise, and it was much easier to convince because we were doing this also in other parts of the world. Markets like London and New York, which are seen as the largest real estate markets in the world. The business model was working. So as people saw that happening globally, then it was a much easier job to do that in India as well.
Now you got your investor in place. You have consolidated your business as one of the largest network in India. I'm sure there are competitors who have come from the hospitality space to also build up their co-working business and made some acquisitions also. But, as I see, they have not been very successful. Let's not talk about the last year, which was a little bit of an aberration in the growth of co-working. What do you see as your mantra for success in India?
Look, I think what we've always focused on is our product, and focusing heavily on actually delivering a product that is unmatched when it comes to the design of our spaces. If you see it, we are always ahead of the curve, or have been ahead of the curve, and people or competitors tend to replicate some of the ideas that we come out with. So the focus of always innovating and delivering a great quality product, I think, is key, and we don't want to dilute that. The second piece is just providing an unmatched member experience. So our community and the experience that the companies get within a WeWork, I think, is something that is very hard to replicate because it comes from our DNA and our culture more than anything else, which is why that was such a big part of how we did our hiring and how we actually grew the company in the early days. Those two things, I think, are like, clear. And with that, we see that, if you're just able to do those things, customers tend to stay with you. You are able to attract customers easier, and things like that. From a growth perspective, I think what COVID has done is actually made our business a lot more relevant. And the hard work that we've done done over the last 4 years in, educating the market about why this business model works and why companies actually want this business model, is now paying off in the sense that landlords are coming to us and saying, come take my building. I'll invest, with you, or I'll invest for you, and we'll, share some of the reward. So I think going forward, the growth strategy is to try to be as asset light as possible. We spend, a lot of time putting our own money and actually, building this business. And now what we want to do is try to bring partners and grow as asset light as possible. And that's going to be our growth strategy for, for next few years. The other thing is that we've seen the rise in demand for, newer type of products. So how we originally, were envisioning our business to be, we've altered that a little bit. We've launched a product called WeWork on demand, which means anyone now can actually book a space online for as low as $500 to $1,000 a day. And so everyone who's remote working from home, who doesn't have the right infrastructure, can come and use our space. We've also launched a product called WeWork All Access. What we've seen is that large companies' employee workforce got dispersed. They all went to different locations. They went back home. They're not able to commute to their central offices. And a lot of companies have given up office space also temporarily for some time. So for this, we've developed a new product where you can just buy a card from us, and you can go and access a WeWork anywhere, basically in the world. So you don't have a dedicated office, but you have 35 offices now in the country, which you didn't have before. Right. So yeah, there's like a lot of changes happening, and the idea is to be ahead of the curve, to innovate and focus heavily on a high quality product and service. And I think like that's just the key.
Karan, let's raised a couple of pertinent points of how office spaces and working in the future is going to look like. I want to touch on a few points as to what's really going to happen to the traditional office working in India. There have been some surveys and some YouTube videos that talk about that 60% of the workspace or the office workspace will be made redundant or would not be required in the future as we go into the new normal. People may start working from home, or people may start renting out workspaces in facilities like WeWork. What do you see the future of how people are going to work and collaborate and work with their organizations on one side, as well as collaborate in your environment on the other end? How is this whole environment going to change, and what's the business opportunity now?
Right. Look, I don't think that office has become, irrelevant or anything like that. I think the use of the office has definitely changed, or the way that it's going to be used is definitely changing. So the way we see it is that, look, that as we come out of this, there are companies and, people who go back 100%, working from offices and working from their headquarters and things like that. You will also have a definitely accelerated amount of people continue working from home, because it has proven to be economical, and it's proven to be something that works for a certain section of people. But what you're going to have is a large amount of the population actually in between, right, in a hybrid type of model. So
correct.
Earlier, when a corporate real estate, when you're looking at your corporate real estate, you were looking at a large headquarter,
campuses and whatnot,
like campuses and potential satellite offices. I actually don't think that's going to change, especially in a country like India, because what you're seeing is that you still have mass amount of hiring happening, and you also have companies now across the entire world that are digitizing, and so all of that work is getting transported to India. So a lot of large companies, they still require a large amount of office spaces, and maybe like the design is a little bit different than it used to be, but you still require physical spaces for people to actually like come into. I think productivity long term within work from home doesn't, work. The need to collaborate is required, and like people need to have a third location, or a location outside of their home for just the mental stability and like mental health and things like that. But what is definitely going to happen is there are going to become different working styles. There are going to be populations of people who only need office like 2 times a week or 3 times a week. There are going to be companies that say, I don't want a central headquarters, but I want, dispersed offices across the entire, country or even the world. There's going to be, populations of the workforce that just need an office for an hour or 2 hours, and just need the infrastructure for that amount of time. So the office has not become irrelevant. I think the way office is going to be used is obviously changed, and so there's going to be a world where there is going to be a mix of all use cases, and that's where we actually think that we are like perfect position to cater to that new demand because we do everything, right? We do from like an hour to we've done now for companies who have signed up with us for 7 years, 8 years in one location. So that's how we are able to like build a competitive advantage. But I'll tell you, like on the traditional side, at least on the embassy side, you still have large companies, your IT services companies or these global e-commerce companies and things like that are looking for campuses like in millions of square feet, not small campuses. They're looking for 1 million, 2 million, 3 million square foot campuses even now, and in some cases they're actually looking to buy the land and actually like have someone construct it, which means it's a permanent location for like a long period of time. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. But I'll just give you from an India context. I think that COVID has maybe worked heavily in the Indian office market, in the advantage of Indian office market, because digitization, IT services is going to become huge, and you have such a huge talent pool of English speaking population that it just continues to be an attractive place for outsourcing, especially for big tech and things like that. So there's going to be a shift in the way things are done, but office is still relevant.
Karan, I want to ask you your thoughts, and this is off the cuff question. Our algos looked at the real estate supply of office space prior to COVID, and at some point in time, some of the cities were actually choking. There was more demand and less supply. And then you had this COVID, which kind of led to a W-shaped recovery of office space demand supply as well as the rental pricing.
Yeah.
In this scenario, how do you think co-working would have reacted? And in the future, how do you think you could probably scale up your business, given that there have been pockets of excess demand and less supply, and excess supply and low demand? How would you be able to mitigate this and equalize and come out winner in the next 5 years in India?
So, very interesting question. I think there's multiple, facets to this. One, from the supply side for us, our business is actually going and acquiring space, fitting it out and actually leasing it in a flexible, manner to smaller businesses.
Correct.
Now, landlords seeing a lot of vacancy and also the need, for smaller requirements and more flexible requirements. There's actually a larger opportunity for us to go and take some of this vacated space at better prices over the long term, with the view that the office market is obviously going to recover as the pandemic ends. And these spaces, there are only limited amount of like good spaces in the country. So I just feel like a thought, like all of India has about 600 million square foot of grade A real estate. Only New York has 600 million square foot of grade A real estate. So you see where the difference is.
One city with one country.
Exactly. So right now, as much as the supply is there, it's still very limited and very small for the amount of growth that India's going to see. So if you are a long-term player in commercial real estate, you'll understand that, look, the space might take a little bit longer to fill up, but it will fill up, sort of eventually. And what we're seeing, like I said earlier, is the landlords, are themselves trying to create flexible, like, convert one or two floors into flexible spaces. But it's not easy to manage a flexible workspace or like a co-working. You just can't just go into it. So
Correct.
that's where we see opportunities for like a, management model or like a hotel operator model where we lend the brand name, we lend our expertise. We don't take any of the risk of the real estate or the
Like
actual
an operations and management type of a model.
Exactly. So that's
Right.
a big part of the asset light model that we actually see in the future, to be able to partner with landlords, help them fill up all of this space with smaller, flexible companies, and lease terms, and actually share some of the revenue with them, or just, manage and operate and deliver our expertise, to them. I think on the demand side, you're already seeing how there's a mindset change basically from companies that,
Right.
only believe that I need to have this office space. It has to be my lease. I need to have this big office, blah, blah, blah. Now thinking like, do I really need it? Can I just take some temporary space? Can I like take 50 seats now and grow to 100 and grow to 200, which is where we are seeing a lot of the demand actually coming in. So yeah, from the supply and demand side, I think like, these are the times in your life where you seize opportunity and can actually result in sort of huge value creation in the future. And, Regis, I believe, had a strategy in the past, and I'm sure they do it even currently, is that any country that went into conflict, or there was some amount of, recession and things like that happening there, that's the time they used to go and acquire real estate, because, that was the best time to go and actually sign deals, liquidity to sort of like do that. So it's a very similar situation. And I think, we are definitely long on office, and we want to like definitely like capitalize on that.
Karan, this is a question, because I'm a REIT operator, I build hospitals and I lease hospitals, just like what you do in the office space.
Yeah.
One of the biggest challenges that I have is project management and time to operationalize, or
Yeah.
time to market
Yeah.
of a certain facility. And given the way things are in India and the level of professionalism that is now, obviously now it's improving. When I started doing business, it was even the JLLs and the people who are in this project management space to get the facility up and running didn't even have the talent pool. How are you kind of addressing this issue at your hand so that you are getting the properties up and running to meet the excessive demand that is now coming up in the new normal?
Right. Yeah, great question. So, we typically have a cycle of anywhere between 6 to 9 months from the time we've selected a building till actually opening and members, sort of walking in. A big part of that is obviously standardizing the process, is like having clear, we have a gate system at WeWork. So, it starts from something called like gate D, where we've basically just identified a building, and then it moves through stages. So like LOI signing to lease signing to then a design phase to a construction phase, etc. So it's very clearly like standardized in terms of like how a building moves and the time taken to move a building, which requires a lot of it's a lot of cross-functional collaboration that happens, and it's almost like handoffs into each function. Also, the product internally, it's not as complex, I guess, as a hospital. I would say
Correct.
it's like,
We have multiple tracks there. Yeah.
yeah, and it's a standardized BOQ. It's standardized sequencing of actually delivering the product. And what we've been able to do over time is work with vendors that have learned also over multiple projects. So, it's not a learning curve that you create each time with a new vendor. You try to use the same vendor who knows exactly the problems and how to do it better each time. And lastly, which I think, in India is always a challenge, and especially on the traditional side, is steady cash flow. So if you have your financial closure in place, and you have your ability to deploy the pay off the bills for the vendors on time, then the delivery can happen very fast. It can happen even ahead of time, because like no one is really like worrying about things. But even in our case, when we were like growing at really high speed, that was a challenge for us. On the traditional, you see developers across the country,
Correct.
buildings that have been
Hamstrung
lying
for cash.
unbuilt for 10 like decades in some cases.
Correct.
Yeah, it's mostly because the money's been diverted somewhere, or something has happened and the project doesn't have the right financial closure to take it to completion, which is I think a big part of what RERA brought in, and at least at least on the residential side. So I think that's obviously key. When we were first starting off the embassy office business, when my dad was started embassy golf links, which was one of the first business parks in the country. We built buildings in 8 months, in like 9 months, and things like that, right? And now the same building takes maybe 12 months, 13, 18 months, almost 2 years to actually get done. So it's not like it's not possible. It just requires right planning, and it just requires planning basically to be able to get it done. The quality of work is a struggle. I'm not going to deny that. It's like, it irritates me even right now, like when there's no straight lines and there's small finishing, corners and like little details, which I feel are like, stupid. It's just stupid that we keep making the same mistakes again. When your switches, like, too little twisted and it's not aligned with the door and all of these things, like, I think it's just a cultural, I don't know. It's like a cultural thing in India that you just kind of like, it's impossible to get that right. We build buildings in Japan, like WeWork does, the same thing in Japan. And in India, when you complete a project, you probably have like a 300-point snag list. In Japan, there's 3. It's like a 3-point, like there's only 3 snags when you deliver a project. So, that's that's just the difference in the skill and
and at the end of the day, we end up being the nitpickers in India.
Yeah.
The boss is nitpicking.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what happens. I can completely empathize with you because, the facility is what we are very proud about, and the finished product is what really matters. And somewhere that culture, as you mentioned, doesn't work through in India as the way the Japanese do it, or the other cultures like the Koreans or somewhere else that happens. I guess we need to bring that into our construction business as well.
The smaller things actually hurt your eyes and just hurt the whole thing the most.
That's what I said. We become nitpickers in the process.
Yeah.
All right, Karan, I want to switch gears a little bit. We talked about the co-working space, how you've scaled this business, how you are looking to expand the business. And I want to talk about your other passion about startup. And, I'm equally passionate about startups because we started Bangalore Angels, and we've been doing a lot on the startup ecosystem. I want to know a little bit about the other side of your story about, how you've been working through the startup ecosystem.
Yeah, sure. Actually, the original reason of starting WeWork itself was, I felt at that time, this was like maybe 2014, 2015, when it was like kind of booming. I just felt there was a lack of Indian startups being able to go global, and which is why the WeWork network and like being able for like Indian companies to connect with global other companies through the WeWork network was so important. And the reason, one a big driving reason of why we even went into this sort of venture. And my dream was to at least help play a part in Indian startups becoming global giants, like all the companies that you see, like your Amazons and things of the world. So being able to play some part in that, and I hope that through WeWork we've actually been able to do something in that area. I personally do invest in a bunch of startups. I think new technologies just interest me, and new ideas definitely interest me. Even now on the embassy side, we're trying to build a prop tech program that can help prop tech startups actually grow in India, because I think it's a very late adopter. Real estate is a very late adopter of that. But in our spaces, it's very exciting to just speak to founders, help them on their journey, try to give them any help that you can, because it's not an easy journey, and I sympathize a lot with them or empathize a lot with them. when I graduated from college, actually, or my last year of college is when I set up my first company, which was a hospitality company. It was very different from what like the traditional real estate, the family business was. It's like setting up a few restaurants, and that's where I felt the pain of like what an Indian, entrepreneur probably goes through, just from an infrastructure standpoint and just building out a business, and that kind of led to the WeWork, story eventually. So I've been through it, and I just like I want to try to help as much as possible, and I think through this platform I'm able to help a lot. Yeah.
Karan, there's a lot of positive feedback from the startup ecosystem, and I really appreciate what you have contributed to the startup ecosystem in India. We are somewhere like the Intel Inside in the startup system, and you happen to be also one of those Intel Inside or WeWork Inside the startup ecosystem in India, I would say. Karan, some personal questions I would like to rapid fire, I would say. I know we have a little bit short of time here. So, Karan, who is your role model now? You've done the WeWork. Who do you look up to now?
That's a tough question. Well, I think
Don't tell me your father. Huh?
I mean, definitely one of the people. Both my parents are definitely like people I look up to. I think from someone obviously like Elon Musk I'm a huge fan of his and everything that he does. I think he's just doing things very differently, and I appreciate that a lot. And his ability to simplify complex, massive problems. His ability to be able to do that, plus manage multiple initiatives like that, I think is like incredibly impressive, and I would love to be able to do that at some point. I think that someone like Warren Buffett actually is also some. I watch a lot of videos on YouTube about him speaking, mainly because while everyone is trying to do like a lot, he's always had this philosophy like don't do a lot, just like focus on things that are going to be big impact, and over time and over slow compounding, that's going to definitely benefit. So while people are always in a rush for like these high numbers and high valuations, I think something I learned from him is just like it takes time, and like that's when you have like longevity, if you're able to sort of like take time and actually doing that. And yeah, I think those are probably like the two people that I always gravitate towards.
And in the co-working space, who do you look up to?
In the co-working space, I think I actually learned a lot from Adam. While we were going through the journey, I learned a lot from him of what to do, what not to do, and I think it really like took someone with high energy to be able to create something so large. And I think right now, actually, Sandeep, who's our new CEO, also is teaching me a lot in a very different way. And I think a combination of both of those has been, amazing. I think out of my peers, Amit from Office, I think has been at this for a long period of time. I think they've been able to create a very credible brand in India and also globally, like something that's globally recognized. I think Ritesh, who started Innovate, is also someone have seen that his ability to give back to the startup ecosystem is massive. He's always been a huge advocate of the Indian startup ecosystem, and it's always with a lot of passion. So I think that that's something that I definitely recognize.
Karan, now you have stepped out of your father's shadow. I'm sure you're on your standing. What does your father tell you? How does he react to your success?
I think that I have to do a lot more, definitely. But no, I know that he's obviously very, happy and proud of both me and Aditya, who's my younger brother, and he's managing the group business while I'm doing this. So I think he's definitely very proud. But if you know the amount of like, my dad is also a machine and is always ever growing and expanding and taking new risks and things like that. So I still have a lot to learn. But yeah, I think that we've tried to keep our feet on the ground as much as possible, and at the same time just focus on the work. So I'm not really thinking about his shadow or anything like that. I just want to like make my own impact as much as possible.
Karan, you raised a good amount of money for your growth at WeWork. You went through that journey.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit what have been your lessons there and now managing the investor once he's on board on your growth story.
I'll tell you that I learned patience in a huge way. Patience because we've had a little bit of a crazy journey. We've only been around like 3 years and or 4 years now. And when we actually went out to raise money for the first time, we got a $200 million term sheet. I had a term sheet sitting right in front of me, which would have been enough money for us to expand, for the next few years. As soon as that happened, next week, the next week, and the NBFC crisis in India hit, ILNFS went
Correct.
bust, and all the banks retracted everything. All the term sheets that were out there, especially for loss-making businesses, got retracted. So that was probably like our first hurdle, first hit. And from there we took some time to recover because we had spent a lot of time doing that. And then we got $100 million term sheet from a private equity fund. And as soon as we were about to actually execute that, the WeWork IPO, a global IPO situation happened, and Adam left, and we went through that whole
Correct.
cycle. And so that also got pulled back. So over the course, and then so it took us almost 24 months to actually finally raise the money. At the same time, obviously the business was expanding at like a lightning pace. We had to manage partners, vendors, all of that. So I think patience is something that I learned. I also learned that having a relationship with all of your stakeholders is very important. Being transparent with your stakeholders is very important because that it creates trust, and not committing on something that you can't deliver is important, but also at the end actually delivering on that promise creates a relationship that goes beyond money or work or whatever it is. It's like then you're part of a journey together. Managing the investor honestly has been easy. It's something that I learned a lot from my dad actually is just being transparent, and not trying to like hide anything or like sugarcoat anything or show something that is unrealistic or unachievable. It's really just being transparent, managing the right expectation, and and like building that relationship. So if you're able to do that and just deliver on small promises consistently rather than like promising something, promising the moon and actually not getting there, I think is a much better strategy, and it just creates someone who will repeatedly invest in you versus be a one-time investor. And I think that's the philosophy that I follow.
Karan, it's been pleasure talking to you. Let me just summarize some of the key takeaways that I am gaining from our conversation. So work from home is going to be something that will transform into some sort of a hybrid model, and where co-working also has a place in the future. As I see a lot of growth and differentiation opportunities, which has created and opened up a huge segment of the market in this space. And obviously, you keep innovating and being the leader in the market. And also your inspirational journey in developing an organization of this stature and this presence in India. It's a really inspiring conversation to have you on our podcast today. Before I let you go, I just need to make a few more announcements and close the session. I'd like to thank our sponsors, our production team, and the people who have been part of the show today, and also part of Karan's team that had been coordinating with our team to get this show in place. And obviously, Karan, I wish you all the best in your growth journey and your aspiration to the startup ecosystem as well. And stay safe.
Thank you so much, Kapil. Thank you. This was a lot of fun, and looking forward to catching up in person sometime very, very soon.
Absolutely.